Middle East and attended secret meetings during the presidential transition with Trump associates. Let's get right to CNN, Sarah Murray. Sarah, what can you tell us about Nader and how he figures into all of this?
Well, he is an interesting character, right? A lot of people sort of haven't heard from him in the last 2 decades, but he's someone who's come into contact with a number of administrations basically by volunteering to open up a lot of these back-channel discussions with elusive Middle East leaders. But the reason that Bob Mueller has cared about him, the reason that he's sort of come into contact with this investigation seems to be about 2 key meetings. One of these was in December 2016. It was in New York. It involved Jared Kushner. It involved Michael Flynn. It involved Steve Bannon. It also involved the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. And George Nader was at this meeting as well. So this meeting with the Emiratis, we later found out, was unmasked by Susan Rice. It was a little mysterious as to why this was taking place. And there was a meeting that followed that was also pretty mysterious. It was a meeting in the Seychelles Islands in January of 2017. This one was Eric Prince, who is the founder of Blackwater, a private security firm, as well as Emirati officials. There was a meeting that took place after that Eric Prince has downplayed. This one was the head of a Russian state-run bank, as well as Eric Prince, and then George Nader was somehow party to this meeting. So we know that Mueller is asking questions about these various meetings, and we know that George Nader is cooperating and essentially telling him what he knows.
We don't know that anything wrong or illegal happened at these meetings, but it does seem to suggest something about the Mueller investigation and its scope.
Right. I mean, the circumstances surrounding these meetings, what was discussed, what went on, that's been a big mystery. And there's no indication that George Nader has done anything wrong. But what it does tell you is he's able to give Mueller a window into potential foreign influence beyond just Russian meddling in the 2016 election, that he is looking at the role of the Emiratis in this and questioning whether there were other opportunities for foreigners to influence Donald Trump's inner circle beyond the presidential campaign.
All right. Fascinating. Sarah Murray, thanks so much. Another international man of mystery who figures prominently into the Russia investigation is Christopher Steele. The former British MI6 agent compiled the now infamous Trump-Russia dossier, which has become a political lightning rod here in Washington. Joining me now is Jane Mayer, who writes extensively about Steele in the latest edition of The New Yorker. Jane, thanks so much for joining us. It's a great story. Some Republicans say Steele is a partisan hack out to get Donald Trump. Democrats say he was just fulfilling a sense of duty by going to the FBI with his dossier. How does Steele play into the Mueller investigation?
Well, he's actually been a source to Mueller. He met in London with Mueller's team last September. So you have to assume that much of what's in the dossier, plus a lot of information about his sources, is now in the hands of Mueller.
What's remarkable about the timeline that you lay out in your story well, when you look back at things in hindsight, you talk about a State of the Union episode that I did around the time of the Democratic convention when we had Robbie Mook on, then the Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, and Donald Trump Jr. And it was right after the first WikiLeaks came out of the DNC. I want to play a little clip of this.
Experts are telling us that Russian state actors broke into the DNC, stole these emails, and other experts are now saying that the Russians are releasing these emails for the purpose of actually helping Donald Trump.
Well, it just goes to show you their exact moral compass. I mean, they'll say anything to be able to win this. I mean, this is time and time again, lie after lie. It's disgusting. It's so phony.
Now, at the time, we didn't know the extent of the Russia election interference program. But now, in retrospect, we know that when Donald Trump Jr. said that to me and to America, he had just a few weeks before met with individuals billed as being with the Russian government who were promising dirt on Hillary Clinton, along with Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner in Trump Tower. It's pretty remarkable.
It's really remarkable. And the thing is, I interviewed Robbie Mook for this story, and what he said was, I mean, partly I wondered, well, you've got Christopher Steele telling you about all of this potential collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Why didn't you make more of it, an issue of it during the campaign? And he said no one would buy it. They just didn't believe it. They just felt he was spinning and it sounded desperate. And I have to say, I was there too as a reporter, and I remember thinking it sounded wild. It was very hard to believe this story, and a lot of people didn't believe Christopher Steele's dossier either when it first came out. But the remarkable thing is, over time, there's been more and more sort of corroboration that's come out over it.
So Mook had possession of some of the Steele dossier because he was writing it up until September, I think.
He probably didn't know much about it at that point. That was pretty early on. But what happened was, as Steele was doing research on this subject, he would filter it up through a channel that would go to the top lawyer for the campaign, who then would tell campaign officials a little bit about what he was finding. But the top lawyer in the campaign said, you know, to him too, it seemed really strange. It was all of this Kremlinology, and he really couldn't make head or tails of a lot of it. People were there was a big learning curve for all of this material.
And also you have an interesting detail about a memo Steele compiled regarding Russian opposition to Mitt Romney as Secretary of State after President Trump won.
Well, yeah, and this is really, I mean, it's the same period that you were talking about just before. After the election, there was sort of an intensification, it seems, of Russian attempts to try to shape the incoming administration. You can see a lot of meetings taking place, and according to a Steele memo that no one had seen before my piece came out, the Russians tried to interfere with President Trump's choice for Secretary of State and stop him from picking Romney, who they saw as too much of a hawk on Russia and who would never lift the sanctions. And they wanted somebody who was friendlier. And it's hard to tell how much weight to give this, but circumstantially, I have to say, Romney didn't make it. He went through a prolonged sort of interview process for weeks. It was embarrassing. And then finally, Trump turned him down and picked Rex Tillerson, who had very warm relations with the Kremlin.
And you point out in the story that Congress passed sanctions against Russia, passed overwhelmingly during the Trump presidency, and neither President Trump nor Rex Tillerson have yet to enforce those sanctions.
That is true.
Jane Maynard, thank you so much. Great story.
As every White House, and it's not abnormal that you would have people come and go, but we're continuing to do great work. We're continuing to focus on the president's agenda, and that's what we're all here to do.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders this afternoon on staffing churn at the White House. So far, the Trump administration has had higher staff turnover than any of the previous 5 administrations, according to the Brookings Institution. We're back with our politics lead and my panel. So the president, Simone, has defended his style of management, saying that he likes conflict. There's nothing wrong with a little conflict.
There is nothing wrong with a little conflict, Jake, but I think this White House is different. Look, I think it's a black hole for moral character and leadership. Almost every single staffer in the West Wing is lawyered up. They don't trust each other. They don't trust what the president is saying. And why should they? Because something different comes out every single day. Look, this may be a reality TV president, and he may think that he is running a reality television show. But the difference is the ratings, which are our standing in the world, they have real consequences. This is not just about the polls, if you will, or what the people are saying on television.
You know, the president also said people are lining up to work at the White House and get a piece of the West Wing. Here's what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said about that today.
One of the problems here is the White House is getting hollowed out, and the number of people capable of doing things, doing real things, whether you agree or disagree ideologically, is getting smaller and smaller, and they seem unable to recruit new people to take these jobs. So the kind of mess-ups we've seen this past week, I think we're going to see over and over and over again.
I know you're not the biggest fan of Senator Chuck Schumer, but do you disagree with what he said?
Well, one of the things that was hammered into my head when I was working for Jim DeMint was that personnel is policy. And if you don't have great personnel, you are not going to have great policy. And so when you have a person like Gary Cohn, who has to work with this whole slew of questionable characters who are now, resigning because of ethical conflicts, all kinds of reasons, you have a few people who try to go to the administration because they believe they can exercise some influence over their area of expertise. That is the shred of, the hope that they're hanging on to. So when you wake up one morning and have your whole economic world thrown into shambles because of a tweet, what's the point in staying? You go.
And Jeffrey, Cohn had talked about leaving before, after the president seemed to make a moral equivalence between the neo-Nazis and the counter-protesters in Charlottesville.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm less sympathetic to Gary Cohn than many people. The idea that, he wants to take a great moral stand over aluminum, but he won't take a moral stand over racism, I don't think that speaks volumes about his character. But in terms of the substance, it matters. I mean, personnel is policy. The fact that that he didn't quit over other, that matters, and I just think it's a I know I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The fact that he couldn't get the tariff announcement out with people lined up to support it, by surprising the people on Capitol Hill, that the procedures matter. And the fact that he couldn't get his act together to release the tariffs in an intelligent way, that shows how when you don't have good staff, you can't get good results.
Simone, Gary Cohn is a former Goldman Sachs executive.
He was the best thing that ever happened to Goldman Sachs in the White House. Look, okay, he is the best thing that ever happened to them in the White House. Look, they got their tax cuts. The tax cut bill, which has now become law, which is, again, a tax cut for the wealthiest people in America, that codified the tax cuts in the law for the businesses and the companies, but the people have temporary tax cuts. So please miss me with this Gary Cohn was so just hurt and shaken by the fact that he couldn't take control of the tariffs, that he was gone. I really think that Gary Cohn was he wanted to be able to go back to his Goldman Sachs buddies and his folks on Wall Street, and he could not do that because he did not have a handle on what is going on, because nobody has a handle on what's happening in this West Wing.
And remember the campaign in 2016 where the then candidate Trump ripped Hillary Clinton to shreds because she gave speeches to Goldman Sachs.
Right.
That was so terrible. Goldman Sachs, what a force for evil. Gary Cohn, Steve Mnuchin, the two most important economic policymakers are former senior officials, or were, at Goldman Sachs.
There is something to be said, though, about Gary Cohn thinking that these tariffs, aluminum and steel tariffs, are actually going to cause damage to the economy, and he doesn't want to be associated with it.
Yeah, and I'm actually very happy to see broader consensus in the media among Democrats that tariffs are bad policy, something that, Republicans have been saying for decades and still adhere to. But in the case of Gary Cohn, listen, he's going to be okay, but he had a lot of expertise. Usually the president does get the best people in the early years of his presidency. President Trump has exhausted a number of experts on year one. I think we all should be wary for the next wave of people who may be coming in, who may have another agenda, who may be looking to exploit that position, and our eyes should be wide open.
All right, everyone stick around. We have a lot more to talk about. How a top British spy and an international man of mystery factor into the Russia investigation. Today, a huge legal blow-up as the state of California and the Trump Justice Department are now suing each other over immigration and sanctuary city policy. Attorney General Jeff Sessions saying that California's laws endanger law enforcement by protecting dangerous undocumented immigrants. California Governor Jerry Brown says his state is not afraid to fight back, saying the Justice Department is lying. Let's bring in CNN's Miguel Marquez. And Miguel, Jeff Sessions flew to California today to announce the lawsuit after a series of attacks between the Trump administration and officials of California.
Yeah, the relationship has just gotten worse and worse and worse over the months, and it's been bad on a range of issues, whether it was the environment or marijuana or tax policy. But this immigration law, and in particular sanctuary immigration laws that California and other cities around the country have, has just pushed this relationship to a whole new level.
The state of California, they are doing a lousy management job there.
The fight between President Trump.
We know the Trump administration is full of liars.
And the California Republic.
This is basically going to war against the state of California, the engine of the American economy. It's not wise, it's not right, and it will not stand.
Now, a heavyweight bout.
How dare you? How dare you needlessly endanger the lives of our law enforcement officers?
The federal government now suing the Golden State, its governor and attorney general over its so-called sanctuary immigration laws. The president first threatened to pull ICE and Border Patrol from the state.
If we ever said, hey, let California alone, let them figure it out for themselves, in 2 months they'd be begging for us to come back. And you know what? I'm thinking about doing it.
Now, his attorney general wants to undo 3 California laws limiting law enforcement cooperation and information sharing about immigration status on mainly law-abiding immigrants.
We are going to fight these irrational, unfair, unconstitutional policies that have been imposed on you and your officers, on our federal officers.
Several California cities already have sanctuary laws on the books. In January, the acting head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement called for arresting officials who passed and signed the laws.
We got to start charging some of these politicians with crimes. And these politicians can't make these decisions and be held unaccountable for people dying.
For its part, California has already sued the Trump administration 5 times on other immigration issues. The federal government now trying to rein in the Golden State and possibly hundreds of other states, counties, and cities nationwide and their immigration laws.
Now, the president is due to visit California for the first time next Tuesday. It is notable because he is the first president since Eisenhower not to visit the Golden State in his first year in office. It gives you a sense of just where California sits on the president's agenda. Jake?
All right, Miguel Marquez in Los Angeles, thanks so much. A deadly nerve agent, an ex-Russian spy, and a mystery that is... And we're back with the politics lead today. A tense day on Wall Street with the departure of President Trump's top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, leaving the White House because of his strenuous objections to the tariffs President Trump is set to impose. Senator John Thune, a member of Republican leadership, today calling Cohn, quote, the voice of reason. Thune continuing, I'm concerned about who's going to be in the president's ear, unquote. This underlines one of the more important points about the veritable cavalcade of White House and Trump administration departure that we've seen almost ever since Mr. Trump took office. It's not just the number of departures that is so jarring, although the sheer volume is quite astounding. It's also the reasoning behind all of these exits, highlighting substantive issues, whether related to ethics or lack thereof, or the Russia investigation, or anything else. Reasons that help explain why the president's approval rating is historically low. The first major departure was National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who was fired after he lied to the FBI and to the vice president about his contacts with the Russian ambassador. And lest we forget, the fired FBI director, James Comey, who has said the president asked him for his personal loyalty and to take it easy on Flynn. Now, the president denied that, but did say he was thinking of the Russia investigation when he decided to send Comey packing. K.T. McFarland was Michael Flynn's deputy after a new national security advisor, General H.R. McMaster, came on board replacing Flynn. McFarland was nominated to be ambassador to Singapore. During confirmation hearings, however, she had been asked about communications between the Russian ambassador and her former boss, Mike Flynn, and she responded, quote, I am not aware of any of the issues or events described. An email obtained by the New York Times called that into question, and the Senate put a hold on her nomination until she further explained her name was soon withdrawn from contention. Scandal has seemed to play a role in other departures as well. Last week, after a marathon testimony before the House Intelligence Committee for their Russia probe, top aide Hope Hicks announced her resignation, a surprise to many since she's one of the president's closest confidants. Her exit also came after the departure of Rob Porter, the White House staff secretary to whom she's been romantically linked. He was fired after past allegations of domestic violence against him were publicly revealed. Turbulence and chaos has marked the Trump administration. Press Secretary Sean Spicer headed for the door in July after Anthony Scaramucci was named as the new White House communications director, a move Spicer adamantly opposed. The mooch also helped get rid of Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, but it was only 11 days into his time at the White House that Scaramucci was fired himself by John Kelly on his first day as Chief of Staff, following some rather colorful commentary to The New Yorker. Scaramucci's departure was followed soon after by Steve Bannon, the nationalist id of the president's campaign. Shortly thereafter, Sebastian Gorka, also ignominiously fired, said in his resignation letter obtained by the Federalist that, quote, forces that do not support the MAGA promise are for now ascendant within the White House. Kelly also showed the door to Omarosa Manigault Newman, who soon showed up on Celebrity Big Brother. And don't forget those pesky ethics questions that have also dodged some members of the administration. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price resigning after his use of private jets for government travel emerged. CDC Director Brenda Fitzgerald quitting after it was revealed she bought tobacco stock. Then, of course, there are the numerous allegations of racist, homophobic, or otherwise inappropriate comments made by those nominated or serving in their Trump administration roles, many of which were brought to light by CNN's K-File team, also leading to a slew of departure. This list of departures, which, by the way, is not even close to comprehensive, we still don't know who might be next voted off the island. H.R. McMaster, perhaps, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who reportedly called the president a moron, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who basically dared the president to fire him last week about the Russia probe, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, also in hot water over the Russia probe, as is FBI Director Christopher Wray, Presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner, who's been under scrutiny for security and ethical concerns, and, of course, the Chief of Staff, the one allegedly bringing order to the White House, John Kelly. So, in context, as you pour out a cold one for your homie, Gary Cohn, your Comey, who almost left once before, by the way, after President Trump claimed there were very fine people marching alongside the Klansmen and Nazis in Charlottesville. While you pour out your cold one for Gary Cohn, keep in mind that what matters just as much as who is leaving is why they're leaving. We'll be right back.
Truth, thus helping to ensure he won the presidential election. In exchange, Trump's attorney Michael Cohen wired Daniels $130,000, and Clifford's new attorney, Michael Avenatti, told NBC's Today Show he has no doubt the president knew.
There's no question the president knew about it at the time. The idea that an attorney would go off on his own without his client's knowledge and engage in this type of negotiation and enter into this type of agreement, quite honestly, I think is ludicrous.
But the real damning information, if true, is what happened little more than a week ago. The president's attorney tried yet again to silence Clifford. On or about February 27, 2018, Mr. Trump's attorney, Mr. Cohen, surreptitiously initiated a bogus arbitration proceeding against Ms. Clifford in Los Angeles, the lawsuit says, in an attempt to intimidate Ms. Clifford into silence and shut her up. Clifford's lawyer included this so-called hush agreement in the lawsuit, saying it was written by Michael Cohen. It refers to Donald Trump under an alias, David Dennison, and Clifford under the name Peggy Peterson. According to the hush agreement, Stephanie Clifford came into possession of certain confidential information pertaining to DD, Trump's alias, which includes information, certain still images, and/or text messages. Michael Cohen goes on to write, included in those are images Donald Trump previously presented to his counsel to exist, i.e., text messages between PP and DD. In other words, Trump told his personal attorney about communications he was having with a porn actress. The pressure being applied to Clifford could explain her recent bizarre talk show appearances.
Did you have a sexual relationship with Donald Trump?
Clifford is now eager to talk and explain why she claims she was coerced into signing a false statement that the affair didn't happen. According to the lawsuit, any breach of the contract would mean Clifford would be obligated to pay the sum of $1 million.
And Jake, the denial of from Trump comes through his attorney, Michael Cohen. He's denied the affair ever took place. Cohen himself claims he never consulted Trump about the non-disclosure agreement and the $130,000 payment to keep Stephanie Clifford's quiet. This lawsuit, Jake, challenges all of that.
All right, Drew Griffin, thank you so much. I want to bring in my panel. Jeffrey Toobin, let me start with you. As a legal matter, does this lawsuit have any merit? And is there anything that President Trump or Michael Cohen may have done that would be against the law?
Well, let me answer the second part first. As far as I can see, there's nothing unlawful that went on here. I mean, this was a contract between people for the payment of money, in turn for silence. There's nothing illegal about that. The question is this a valid contract? And according to Daniel's lawyer, Trump never signed it. And if Trump never signed it under whatever name or under any name that was legally binding, then she's free to do whatever she wants. So, I mean, I think the threshold issue here is, was there a contract and did Donald Trump sign it? According to the copy that's attached to the lawsuit, his name is not on it, but there may be some other copy out there where he did sign.
Now, Stormy Daniels claims in her lawsuit, Amanda, that she was forced to sign the false statement when she told the Wall Street Journal, quote, rumors that I have received hush money from Donald Trump are completely false. Then page 5 of the lawsuit details another act of intimidation, according to her, from just last Tuesday, February 27th. The fact that this may still be going on up until February of 2018 certainly seems to change this whole idea like this happened in the distant past.
Yeah, if there's ongoing acts of intimidation, certainly that bears is worthy of an investigation. But the one thing that we do know that is not in question is that we have two firm instances of Trump's allies using the legal process to buy the silence of women in order to suppress information from voters before the election. And these are questions that get to the president's character and certainly were, big factors in this election given the Access Hollywood tapes. I mean, we're talking about Donald Trump covering up affairs he had, with an adult film actress, a former Playboy model. during the election. This was an active thing, and voters should have had access to that information because it does get to the president's character, not only in terms of him not being faithful to his wife, potentially damaging his children in the process, but these are things that open up a president to blackmail, extortion, corruption. The fact that voters didn't have access to this information is very, very worrisome.
Simone, the White House repeated today that since the case that the case has already been addressed, they didn't need to talk about it. The president's already talked about it. Since the Wall Street Journal dropped Wall Street Journal story breaking the story of Stormy Daniels dropped back in January of this year, we can only recall one other time that the White House talked about it at all. And take a listen.
There's no question the president knew about it at the time. We haven't disclosed all the facts and evidence that we're aware of in connection with this as it relates to the filing of the complaint, and there's many other additional facts and evidence that we have, and we think that's going to come to light.
No, and that's not the soundbite I wanted. I wanted the soundbite number 3. It's Raj Shah, the White House Deputy Press Secretary, answering questions. Anyway, we're having some issue with that. But I guess one of the problems is, okay, here it is.
Is the president aware that his lawyer paid that kind of money to a porn star to buy her silence? Does he have proof of that?
I haven't asked him about it, but that matter has been asked and answered in the past.
Not since he acknowledged this. Yeah. He acknowledged this last week. This is the first time we've had a chance to ask about it. So can you go back and we find out if the president approves of the fact?
Yeah, I haven't asked him about that.
Will you ask him about that?
I haven't asked him about it.
But will you ask him about it, Rob?
I'll get back to you.
So, I mean, there's just this whole spray of lies about this. First of all, you heard Sarah Sanders today act as though the American people knew about this incident back in 2016 before President Trump got elected. No, they didn't. The story broke in January.
We certainly didn't know.
And then second of all, they keep saying, oh, we've addressed this, we've addressed this. They haven't addressed this.
They haven't addressed anything. And, I think it's a sad tactic for the White House press secretary's office and their shop to use the fact that they have not directly asked the president about it to absolve themselves from answering questions. That is a tactic, and I think the American people should know that it is their duty to go and get these answers. That is why they are to stand in front of the podium. At this point, they're trying to avoid, I think the press office is trying to avoid actual lies by saying we haven't asked the president about it. I have not asked. Will you ask? I'll get back to you. Again, they are trying to avoid themselves being caught up in this web of lies that President Trump and, his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, have helped weave together. So I think that's what's happening here. But we don't have the answers, Jay. We want the answers. I don't know who has the answers, but I'd like to find them.
Does this matter, Amanda? Does it matter that President Trump may have spent $130,000 as his lawyer, or his lawyer may have done that to buy the silence of a woman with whom he had an extramarital affair?
It should matter. I've heard some Republicans and conservative talkers say this stuff happens. Bill Clinton did it. Voters don't care. I care. I'll be the fussy conservative that actually believes in family values still. Donald Trump went through a very messy divorce with his first wife, Ivana. I can't imagine that didn't do some damage to his children. I mean, it was messy. It was out in the tabloids. Everybody can go look it up. And when I see this now, I think of Barron. He's old enough to read. And so, let's get out of the political world. Let's get out of the legal world. Does a man of character do something like this? And can you trust him with the power of the presidency, knowing that he would potentially wreck his family and hide it in court and pay off these women? No.
Everyone stick around. We have a lot more to talk about. It's not just how many people are leaving the White House these days. It's also, in our Money Lead today, they're targeting all American products. Seems like everything but apple pie. The European Union considering adding new tariffs to classic American exports in retaliation for threatened U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. We're talking about delicious, delicious bourbon, denim, peanut butter, even motorcycles. Worth mentioning, the tariffs on Kentucky bourbon and Wisconsin-based Harley-Davidsons would hit the two home states of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan. Both of those Republicans are against the tariff proposal. And we've just learned President Trump could impose those tariffs by the end of this week. In our World Lead today, police now say a former Russian spy and his daughter were poisoned with a nerve agent after being found unconscious in a small English town. As investigators try and find out if this was a Kremlin hit, politicians in the United Kingdom are now calling for an investigation into this and other suspicious deaths that could be tied to the Russian government. I want to bring in CNN's Phil Black. And Phil, experts say this case seems eerily similar to the poisoning of another Russian spy in 2006.
Yeah, Jake, that's right, but in many ways this case is more brazen, even more concerning. You can see the restaurant behind me is still cordoned off by police. It's one of the few areas in central Salisbury where the police are still investigating, trying to work out where they believe that nerve agent, a chemical weapon, was deployed at a time when these streets were filled with people walking between shops, restaurants and pubs. The police believe a former spy and his daughter were the targets, but it clearly represented a risk to everyone in the area as well, because a police officer, one of the first responders who rushed to help the father and daughter, is now in serious condition in hospital as well after he was exposed to it.
This is being treated as a major incident involving attempted murder by administration of a nerve agent.
Former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter, now both critically ill, were deliberately poisoned by a nerve agent, targeted specifically, according to police.
Our role now, of course, is to establish who is behind this and why they carried out this act.
New video shows the former double agent at a shop in Salisbury, England on February 27th. A simple life. Far from this 2004 arrest in Russia, where the spy was thrown into a van, later sent to court and then found guilty of treason for selling Russian secrets to the British. The convicted traitor was brought to a tarmac for a spy swap, an exchange of agents between the US and Moscow in 2010. He lived quietly in Salisbury until Sunday. That's when police say he and his daughter were found unconscious on a mall bench. The mystery has prompted urgent questions and careful warnings in Parliament.
Though I am not now pointing fingers, because we cannot, Mr. Speaker, as you'll understand, point fingers, I say to governments around the world that no attempt to take innocent life on UK soil will go either unsanctioned or unpunished.
The case is reminiscent of another former Russian agent, Alexander Litvinenko. He was hospitalized and later died after drinking tea laced with radioactive polonium. From his deathbed, Litvinenko called out Russian President Vladimir Putin directly, saying, "You may succeed in silencing one man, but the howl of protest from around the world will reverberate, Mr. Putin, in your ears for the rest of your life." Putin has denied all involvement in that murder, just as the Russian government has denied any knowledge of what happened to Skripal.
But what about the other 14 cases that several members have now raised of suspicious deaths?
Now MP Abet Cooper is calling for an investigation into the deaths of people linked to Russia that were ruled suicides or accidents on British soil in recent years.
There are serious questions about whether the police investigations were thorough enough.
She's asking about cases including Russian whistleblower Alexander Perepilichny, found dead outside his home in Surrey in 2012, and Boris Berezovsky, an exiled Putin critic, found dead on his bathroom floor near London in 2013. So, Jake, you can see there Russia is believed to have motive. Skripal was a Russian traitor in the form of the previous killings that are believed to have taken place here, and of course the chemical weapon, a very specific, specialised weapon belonging to very few countries. Jake.
Phil Black, thank you so much. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter at Jake Tapper, or tweet the show at The Lead CNN. That is it for The Lead today. And now turn you over to one Mr. Wolf Blitzer. He's right next door in the Situation Room. Thanks for watching.
Happening now, breaking news, hush fund. The White House struggles to explain whether President Trump knew about a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels to help keep her quiet about an alleged affair. But Daniels is suing the president, saying that agreement is now invalid and revealing stunning new details. Poison spy. British police say a former Russian spy and his daughter were deliberately poisoned. Did Moscow have anything to do with the nerve agent attack? Mueller's new mark. Special counsel Robert Mueller as a new cooperating witness, a Middle East middleman who sources say attended secret meetings between the United Arab Emirates and Trump associates during the transition. And Chaos Incorporated. A day after the resignation of another top White House advisor, the White House defends the extraordinary turnover in senior staff, saying it is not abnormal. Is chaos normal? I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, an increasingly chaotic White House is grappling with new revelations about the president's alleged affair with a porn star. After actress Stormy Daniels filed a lawsuit against Mr. Trump declaring a hush money agreement null and void, late today the president's press secretary at the White House tried to avoid questions about the story, but ended up confirming some new details of it. I'll ask the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, about those breaking details. And our correspondents and specialists, they are all standing by with full coverage. Let's begin over at the White House, a White House on the defensive after a porn star sues the President of the United States. Let's go straight to our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. Jim, this has got to be a first.
Oh, that's right, Wolf. Just as aides of the president are insisting there is no chaos going on inside the White House, a new scandal has emerged for the president. This time, the storm is not about policy or personnel shakeups. For the first time, the White House spoke at length about the allegations from a porn star who says she had an affair with the president. A perfect storm, it is not. New storm clouds have settled in over the White House in the form of porn star Stephanie Clifford.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Who also goes by Stormy Daniels and alleges she had an affair with the president that Mr. Trump's lawyer tried to cover up with a secret payment.
The president has addressed these directly. The president has denied the allegations against him.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders danced around the question of whether Mr. Trump knew that his personal attorney Michael Cohen had arranged a $130,000 payment to Daniels in the weeks before the 2016 election. Sanders also revealed that the dispute between Daniels and Mr. Trump has continued, with an arbitration decided in the president's favor.
There was no knowledge of any payments from the president, and he's denied all of these allegations. I can share that that the arbitration was won in the president's favor, and I would refer you to the president's outside counsel on any details beyond that.
That's not how an attorney for Daniels describes it. In the lawsuit filed by Daniels, her attorney calls that arbitration bogus, saying it was initiated surreptitiously, without even providing Ms. Clifford with notice of the proceeding and basic due process. That attorney says the president had to have known about the payment.
There's no question the president knew about it at the time. The idea that an attorney would go off on his own without his client's knowledge and engage in this type of negotiation and enter into this type of agreement, quite honestly, I think is ludicrous.
The White House is also finding itself entangled in a messy fight over the president's plan to slap tariffs on products from key U.S. trading partners. But there are signs the White House is no longer standing firm on the issue, hinting there may be some exceptions.
There are potential carve-outs for Mexico and Canada based on national security and possibly other countries as well. That would be a case-by-case and country-by-country basis, but it would be determined whether or not there is a national security exemption.
It's the trade issue that prompted the president's top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, to resign. Another example of White House chaos, unless you ask the press secretary.
If it was, then I don't think we would be able to accomplish everything that we've done. It's not abnormal that you would have people come and go.
Democrats are seizing on the constant reality TV-style turmoil to push back on the president's claim.
Everybody wants to work in the White House.
That everybody in Washington wants to work for him.
One of the problems here is the White House is getting hollowed out, and the number of people capable of doing things, doing real things, whether you agree or disagree ideologically, is getting smaller and smaller, and they seem unable to recruit new people to take these jobs.
Now, one thing we should note is that the White House press secretary said today that the president has addressed these allegations from Stormy Daniels directly. He made it clear that none of these allegations are true. That is false. The president has not done that. And so far, the president's outside attorney who arranged that porn star payment, Michael Cohen, has not yet commented on these latest moves from Stormy Daniels. But in a statement last month, Wolf, Cohen told reporters that this payment to Daniels was lawful and not a campaign contribution. But, Wolf, it seems the storm clouds are still here at the White House. They haven't moved on just yet, Wolf.
You're absolutely right. Jim Acosta at the White House. Thanks very much. With her lawsuit, porn star Stormy Daniels is removing the veil of secrecy over her alleged affair with Donald Trump. Let's go to our national correspondent, Sarah Seidner. Sarah, first of all, take us through this actual lawsuit.
Look, we are now for the very first time hearing details that a lot of folks wanted to hear and seeing the documents of this non-disparagement agreement that they say was simply an agreement to shut Stormy Daniels up. Donald Trump is referred to as David Dennison, and the porn star Stormy Daniels is referred to as Peggy Peterson, according to the details of a non-disparagement agreement revealed publicly for the first time.
Did she have a sexual relationship with the president?
Yes.
Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump and a company linked to Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen, to invalidate the agreement allegedly created to prevent Daniels from talking about her alleged intimate relations with Donald Trump. That agreement was signed 11 days before the 2016 presidential election by Cohen and Stephanie Clifford, Daniels' legal name. And Clifford was eventually paid $130,000 to seal the deal. The lawsuit argues that the agreement is null and void because it was not signed by Donald Trump. Daniels' lawyer says Mr. Trump purposely did not sign the agreement so he could later, if need be, publicly disavow any knowledge of the contract and Daniels.
She believes it's important that the public learn the truth about what happened.
Just last month, Cohen admitted to facilitating the $130,000 payment to Daniels from his own personal funds, but insisted that, quote, neither the Trump organization nor the Trump campaign was a party to the transaction with Ms. Clifford, and neither reimbursed me for the payment, either directly or indirectly. Daniels' attorney won't reveal if there are text messages or photos that could corroborate her story.
She also says, according to this document, that there were tangible items, photos, images, that she had them, and according to this agreement, she won't turn them over. She will never release them publicly. Does she still have photos, images, text messages, documents that verify this claim?
That's a question that Ms. Daniels will have to ultimately answer.
Do you know the answer to that question?
I do know the answer.